Hey guys, I know that living with chronic illness can feel like an endless fight. There's horrible fatigue, brain fog, your body's not cooperating, and on top of all of it, the medical system often has no answers. That's why these recovery interviews are so important. They give us hope and information when we need it the most. And today's guest has an incredible story of getting his life back. Hi everyone, I'm Raelan. If you're new here, welcome. If you're not, welcome back. Here on my channel, we explore recovery from conditions like ME/CFS and long COVID. We talk about what's worked, what hasn't, and what were the key resources that helped people to recover. I'm so excited today to introduce Helmut from Ontario, Canada. Another fellow Canadian. Yay! You are gonna love Helmut. He is so awesome. He had a rough journey. He faced over 70 symptoms and got down to only 2 safe foods that didn't make him feel worse. He was bedridden for 8 months of his journey with chronic fatigue and chronic pain. He had gut issues, crippling anxiety, you name it. But through determination, he found his own path to recovery, and he's here to share his incredible journey and those hard-won lessons with us. So let's welcome Helmut. Helmut, so amazing to have you here today. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
So you have had quite the journey. Let's dive right in. Can you take us back?
I would say, throughout my life, it kind of went up and down, up and down, up and down. And I would say 4 years ago is when my perfect storm happened. I had an emergency surgery for diverticulitis, and I got out of it, was healing. Everything was fine. Felt like it was like the eye of the storm. Nothing was happening. Everything was, working fine. And then all of a sudden, like a switch went off. I got hit with 70 symptoms, and I went from eating normal foods to, my wife would be making foods like soups and charcuterie boards. And the next thing you know, I'm reacting to everything. So I went from eating normal foods to having 2 safe foods out of nowhere, gut issues, stabbing pains, IBS, and you name it, all the not so fun things about, gut issues, anxiety, tachycardia, the 70 symptoms, OCD, looping thoughts, anxiety, pains. And I didn't know what was going on, right? I was like, this must be my gut. Maybe it makes sense. I had surgery. I was on antibiotics. I got to fix my gut. So I went down all these kinds of rabbit holes, joined all these Facebook groups. And that wasn't helping me. I had no answers. I thought I was a freak because even my wife, she's like, is this possible? Does this people that have this, like, you read about this once in a while, but then you go through it and then you think you are like, this can't be happening. Is this my reality right now? So this was, constant second by second. It was like I was going through, a daily exorcism with my health because I didn't know what was going on. And then one of the groups that I joined, one of the girls mentioned that she took DNRS and that she was able to eat 11 foods, right? And for me, I was like, 11 foods, that's, oh my goodness, right? And right away, her post got deleted. And I was like, why is this? So I started noticing that some of these groups, they don't like to hear any stories about people recovering. And I was like, so I saw a glimmer of hope because I was one of those people that it became my reality because I was on these groups that get used to it, start taking antihistamine, start, go on disability, right? And there's no talk about, because people are looking for, well, maybe if I fix my gut, will I come out of it? Maybe if I, go on these protocols, will I get out of it? And then most of these women that were on there, these moderators were like, no, we don't like giving people false hope. We want you to, understand, because that's, we want to make sure that we have a safe environment. And we don't want to talk about any, modalities where you recover and, but then I got this one post from the girl, and I messaged her, and she's like, yeah, I took the DNRS. So I started Googling, watched some of the success videos, and I was like, all right, some of these people are like me. I was like, okay. Then I saw Brea Katrin, her success story. And I was like, that's me. My goodness. She has a lot, like 80% of the things she had, I had. So then, right away, I was like, I'm starting DNRS. And I didn't understand how it worked. I was kind of still lost. I was like, how does the neural pathway, gets rid of disease? How does that work? And I didn't understand how it worked, but I did it anyway, right? So I paid the money because I had a little bit of money left over. I was like, I'm going to do this. So I was on the course of doing the brain retraining. So I started doing it. I was committed. I was like, that's it. I'm doing this. I don't care. No matter what, I'm jumping in head first. I'm going to do this. So I did it. I started healing physically. So all of a sudden my physical symptoms started to go away. I'm like, okay, this is great. I got a routine. I got a path. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to be a success story. This is going to be amazing. And then I noticed that the more I healed physically, the more my mental alarms started to skyrocket. And I was like, I never had the OCD thoughts in my life before. I didn't understand what am I going through? I feel like I'm going crazy. And I'm like, I wish I had my physical symptoms back almost. I could deal with that over these mental symptoms because they were just chaos. It felt like second by second, I was like underwater getting, barely getting air every 3 seconds mentally. It was like the OCD storm was relentless, like having an exorcism every 3 seconds, constantly. I didn't know what was going on. So then I would reach out to other brain retainers, and there was a few. One of them, Simona, she told me, yeah, I went through that. You should try to do this other modality. I didn't like jumping modalities because it was triggering for me, right? Because when you're on a path and then all of a sudden somebody's saying this path might not be everything. There's other things you should maybe look into. I didn't like that, but I saw the evidence from her that it worked, right? So I'm like, I'm going to take a stab at it. So I had to kind of pivot from DNRS and get into taking away the resistance, because from what I was learning is I was doing a lot of stop, distract, redirect, right? And that just made my alarms go bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So I had to change my responses. So I started to allow my thoughts and symptoms to be there, let them run wild, ask for more, and then engage. And I started doing that as my new pivotal moment. Of course, I, made mistakes, tried different things, experimented on, different modalities, fell on my face over and over again. But eventually, being my own guinea pig, I started to see patterns that worked, right? So I had to fall on my face to figure it out in a way. And then I started seeing the path, and I started working towards it, and things made sense. I started seeing more evidence. I started gaining leverage. And then with, trust and sticking with it, I finally recovered. Of course, I had the setbacks and the shit shows in between, but I finally recovered, and I got back into having a normal life and going beyond recovery, trying to restore, right? I just kept going, man. Actually, I still do the methods. I still do my visuals. I still do certain things, not so much for health reasons, but for like business, things I want to do in life. So, these methods that I've been using, I use across the board with life. And I thought, you know what? I want to talk about this and share my experience with people. So then I started my YouTube channel. I've been there. It's been 4 years of this journey getting here. It's been quite exciting. You know what? I think it's a bit of a gift too.
It's interesting. A lot of people say something along those lines. So what makes it feel like a gift for you?
Because before this, I was a guy going to work, coming home, watching TV, kind of rotting, having no motivation in life. I was kind of miserable. Like if I were to go to the beach, the beach is supposed to be an amazing place to be. You're supposed to be happy. I would feel like maybe a 4 out of 10. Right? I was like, yeah, whatever. I was just miserable. Like my baseline was at 1,000. My loads were, up to the brim, and I was just running a survival program, and I didn't know it. I was running like this angry survival program. And after, going through this, you're forced to start from the bottom and really like go through all the layers of the onion, go through open all these doors. And it's like you're pulling out weeds and planting new seeds and becoming, a new person. It's like the old self kind of dissolves and dies, and you create the new person that you want. So now it's like going to the store is like it's an exciting thing. I feel good. I don't have my brain hijacking me all the time. I don't have these thoughts, like this orb of an alarm that I'm creating these avoidance behaviors around. Now it's like this has calmed down. It's not there anymore. And it's like I'm discovering life again. Everything's motivating. Like everything's exciting. It's like, well, what am I going to do? What am I going to create? What am I going to create in my life? It's like there's so much passion and motivation to just see what I can do with my life. When before it was, right? And then symptoms. And then eventually when I had my perfect storm, right? Like so many people go through when they have these, there's no hope. You feel alone. There's no answers, right? So now it's coming out of it. Like I've learned so much from this experience, my toolbox that I can use for the rest of my life, because I'm sure life will keep throwing me curveballs, right? But I have the tools now to get through it and to also share my experience and help other people.
That is very well said. And I'm so sorry that you've had to go through this, but how incredible all that you've learned. 70 symptoms. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
You made some really good points. One question though I've had since the beginning. What were your two safe foods?
Oh,
I'm
beef
sorry.
and rice.
Do you say beets?
Beef,
Oh, beef and
not
rice.
beets. Beets were okay, but if I looked in the toilet after I ate beets, that would have put me in a loop for 2 weeks. So that wouldn't have been worth it. I avoided beets because of that.
Beef and
But
rice.
yeah, beef and rice.
I love how you pointed out too. I don't think I've heard anybody say this, but I think you are 100% right that cognitive symptoms, at least in my experience and in my opinion, are far worse than the physical ones. I'm not saying the physical ones can't be really unpleasant. Just I
Yeah.
would take physical ones all day long over the cognitive ones because they really are. And we downplay it. We make it seem like those are the minor ones, or those don't deserve a lot of our attention, or they're just kind of fluff or all in our head. My
Yeah,
dog's going crazy.
they can really paralyze you. Yeah, they
Yeah.
can there's no like instant relief. Sure,
Yeah.
like I started switching my methods to allowing the thought to be there, letting it do its thing instead
Yeah.
of, resisting what you resist persist type thing.
Yeah.
That made it worse. But when I started to let it do its thing, ask for more, it would burn half its energy, right? It would burn half its energy, but I was working more of the long-term work. Like the work I was doing here allowed me to get, recovery coming here. So I had to have trust because it wasn't just like, oh, it's gone, right? This journey of recovery isn't going to be relief in the middle. It was actually a shit show that was constant.
Yeah.
It was like, right? So, and going through that, you learn a lot about yourself. You learn a lot of patience, which, I was never a guy that had patience before. So, yeah, you learn a lot of skills going through this and building leverage and setbacks. And I had to also understand just because I feel like shit right now does not mean that I'm not walking towards recovery. Especially when you're in the thick of it and you have those setbacks hit you, it creates a reality because the brain's trying to protect you and keep you alive. So it's going to send you alarms that get your attention, right? Because it thinks there's a liger on your back, right? Or a tiger or a bear that's attacking you right now. So it's got to get your attention. And it's really good at doing it. It's doing its job. And for me, I had to understand what it's doing, but I had to also learn how to get uncomfortable. I had to learn how to be scared and sit in the fear, but change my response. And with repetition, eventually your alarms become your friends almost, right? And then eventually the brain goes, okay, you know what? He's safe. We're good. Let's turn that alarm off. And then my baseline started to come down because I wasn't fighting and resisting with my thoughts anymore. I wasn't, stop, stop, stop. I was allowing. And then it started to finally come down. And then because of that, my alarm system started to trust me and go, okay, let's turn off alarms. And then I went back to standby. And then I wasn't being hijacked by my thoughts, which is the thought of, if you were to ask me that 2.5 years ago, well, there's going to be a time where you're going to be able to be in the present moment and actually enjoy the present moment without having your mind hijacked. I'd be like, that's impossible. Like I could not have like a moment of silence because my brain would grab onto something else. Like, no, danger, this, fear, phobias. Like it was constant, relentless. And now I can just, go for a walk with my dogs, look at a flower and go, man, this is amazing. And then nothing. Peace. I would have never thought I could do that. It's amazing.
So during your recovery, when you were on the right path and, seeing progress, what did it actually look like to implement this? What would an average day or week look like? Like how and when did these strategies come in and what did they look like?
For me, it was like a 9 to 5 routine. I was very strict. Like I bought a calendar kind of like this. And like on a Sunday, I would schedule out my week. And I needed steps because, with 70 symptoms, I couldn't just go live life because any moment, especially with the OCD looping thoughts, my brain would hijack me like quickly. So I needed steps. I needed a routine. So I had Post-it notes that I posted everywhere in my car just to keep me on the path. Because when I was in the thick of things, you might know some things like the back of your back and know it really well. But when you're in the thick of it, it's like you get a brain fart, right? The alarms take over and you just go, what was I supposed to do? Right? So then I had my Post-it notes everywhere, plastered everywhere. If somebody were to sit in my car, right, sometimes I forget I had these Post-it notes everywhere. They probably think I was a crazy person, right? But that's what I need to do to stay on track is have the Post-it notes, have my calendar, schedule out my week. So in the beginning, in the morning, I'd get up, make my bed, do a daily dare, the Dare app. I love that app because it showed me how to allow my anxiety. It's an anxiety app.
Okay.
It's, yeah, so I would do a daily dare for 10 minutes, right? So while I was getting ready, brushing my teeth, I would just let it play. And then I was out the door at 8 o'clock. I'd go do my visuals for an hour. I'd go park somewhere, grab a tea. At the time, I wasn't really drinking, a bottle of water. I'd sit somewhere where there's like nature, and I would get into it. I'd get into my visuals, do that for an hour, and then I'd walk my dog for a bit, and then I would go for my own walks for 2 or 3 hours, and I would elevate. And then I would, at nighttime, I would dance for 1 hour. Every day I was doing this. I never missed a day. I would dance. I'm not a dancer either. I'm a horrible dancer. But I had my private room where I was dancing, make a fool out of myself, but I enjoyed it. I was elevating, listening to 1970s groove rock, and I was getting jiggy with it. And I did that every night. And in between that, after the visuals and going for walks, I would always try to find things to engage with. So because my thoughts were constantly trying to grab me. So throughout the day, I would allow them to be there. I would engage, but I also bring them with me on my shoulder. I'd be like, okay, come with me on the shoulder while I go cut the grass. We got to go to the grocery store. We got to get some things that we're going to make for dinner, or I got to drive my daughter here or my mom there. So any opportunity that I had to do something, I would go do it. And I would bring my alarms with me. I would acknowledge them, let them do their thing, and then we'd engage. And this was my routine. It was, in a way, it was like my routine was like my exposure, constantly, right? Because going to the grocery store for me was like a war zone. It was really difficult in the beginning. Of course, in the beginning, I did it slowly, right? Until eventually I had the routine that I could do. So in the beginning, it was bedridden, start slow. Eventually you go a little bit, right? So incrementally, my circle started going bigger and bigger and bigger. And every time I did something that made me feel uncomfortable, I would have my alarms ringing, right? I'd have my setbacks. I'd feel like shit. I'd feel horrible. But that became a pattern that I understood was necessary, right? I needed to have that in order for me to gain the leverage. And I would also send a different message. Instead of white knuckling or surviving through, the alarms ringing, I would embrace it, ask for more. Even though I'm feeling like I'm having an exorcism, I would lean into it, ask for more, right? And that was my routine. It was not easy, but I forced myself to stick to a routine, to get uncomfortable every day, to get out there and recalibrate, and challenge myself. That's what the daily dares did, right? They would say, okay, today do something challenging that makes you feel uncomfortable on purpose, and whatever it is, ask for more, lean into it, and keep doing it. So that was every day by day, week by week, different seasons, right? It'd be winter time, there'd be storms. I was out there walking. I went from being bedridden within 8 months to walking 12 kilometers a day. That was, I was like, I'm doing this. I don't care. I'm sticking to it. And I started to enjoy, my routine. And it was something that I didn't want to keep away from. I was focused, and it was something that I think I needed. So 3 years later, eventually my routine is now my lifestyle. So now it's not something that I have to do for a health reason. It's something that I enjoy doing. So I might not do a daily dare or anything like that. I still do my visuals. I go for my walks. I take the dogs for a walk, and I try to, with my visuals, I do future visuals with business, like what I want to do with business things or what I want to create in my life. So it went from something I had to do and a routine to a lifestyle that I implement daily.
So many important things from what you just shared jump out at me. One of them being, you say, because even though you did have that extended period of time where you were bedridden, you also had a time after that where you did have energy, you could walk, you could dance, but you still had all of these symptoms. Because I have quite a few people reach out to me saying that these stories don't always resonate because either for periods of their journey or all of it, like they have all these symptoms, but fatigue isn't the dominant one, which it is in a lot of the stories that we hear. So some people can be like, oh, this doesn't count. And of course it does. It's just people have symptoms all over the map. So it's nice to hear a story shared where, at least for parts of your journey, you were still really, facing a lot of symptoms, even though you could go for long walks and you could dance. You still had to
Yeah.
implement these things.
I noticed that. I think with chronic fatigue, because I had chronic fatigue syndrome, but it only lasted me for 8 months because I had the 70 symptoms.
Yeah.
I didn't put as much focus on the chronic fatigue. I didn't put it on the pedestal. It wasn't grabbing my attention as much as compared to my gut issues. My gut issues was my nightmare, right? So sure, I had chronic fatigue. Sure, I had other sensitivities that other people might be dominant, but my dominant alarm was my gut issues. So I kind of worked through that and I tucked it into my routine, right? And sure, I had my weeks where I had my chronic fatigue, but I moved through it quicker because my mind was getting my attention with other symptoms. And sometimes having more symptoms lets you work through things easier than if you had maybe 10 and you have the dominant, 5 or 3 that really get your attention. It's kind of more of a struggle.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And the other thing that really stood out to me is how you talked about the exposure. I haven't had anyone, most people don't explain it that way, but it's a really good point. I interviewed a psychologist on the channel at one point who treated people for phobias, and then she herself ended up getting ME/CFS. And she very much used the same strategies, gradual re-exposure therapy strategies that she used on phobias that she did with her own ME/CFS recovery. So I think that's a great way to phrase it, and a great way to think about it.
The exposure that I did is interesting because I used exposure for my thoughts. So I'll talk about two ways I did it. The first way was if I had something on the menu for Tuesday where my brain's like, we're going to give you this thought and you're going to loop on it, I would do turbo on exposure on turbo. So I would say what scares me, whatever the thought is, in detail, and I'd record it. And I would say it 10 times. So I'd put myself in a stress response on purpose. And then I would sit through the fear. After I said it in detail, I'd sit through the fear, allow it to be there, right? Then I would engage. And then later on the day, I would listen to that recording and do it again. And then my alarm would go from a 10 to a 6. Then I would do it again later on that day, maybe the next day and the next day. Eventually that thought that was really, taking a hold of me would come down to a 0 and then my alarm would be turned off and then I would be like, meh. And I did that same with foods. So going from mental to physical things, eventually I got to the point when after I was eating safe foods for a year and a half because I wasn't ready to train on foods yet because it was still very severe. But eventually after a year and a half, I was doing I brought my baseline down enough and I was like, okay, let's train. Let's start doing foods. And I had reactions, of course, but they weren't as severe as they were in the beginning. If I ate like even outside a little bit of my safe zone, I would be in a 3-week flare. And it was relentless. And then finally, I'd have to go back on my safe food for it to calm down. So I got to a point where I started to get the flares, but I would forcefully drag them out longer. So I would drag them out longer and stick to my routine. And then I'd go back to my safe food. And then I would train on a food, get a flare, drag it out longer, ask for more, go back to my safe food. And while I'm doing this, I'm doing my routine. So I kind of normalize it and change the program of it, but I still had to have the symptoms. I still had to have the flares. I almost purposely triggered the flare, and that took me 8 months of that routine. And eventually, it started turning off the alarms, and eventually I could eat foods with ease. Of course, I'd have setbacks here and there, but now because of that, I'm eating all the foods. I'm actually eating spicy foods every day, chili, more chili than I've ever eaten in my life. And nothing, except if I eat beans, of course, that's normal. But, aside from that, that's what I had to do with exposure. It was almost go towards the alarm, bring it up, feel uncomfortable, within a safe zone, of course, right? Don't do something that's head first in the beginning of your journey because then you're just asking for trouble. But I use this across the board for all major symptoms that I had. I'd go towards it. I would trigger the flare on purpose so that, you're going towards the alarm and you're showing a message of safety on how you sit in the danger in a way. And that was allowing the brain to recalibrate and turn the alarms off. So exposure was really, really important in my journey.
Yeah, it's a tough thing to wrap your head around, but every symptom flare is an opportunity to get well because it's an opportunity to retrain your thinking, your wiring, your nervous system, and all of that. And I didn't understand it when I was doing it, but it was very similar with my recovery because I did it through movement. Exercise is a bit of a stretch, but just, 1 minute of movement a day. And then next week I tried 2 minutes of movement. And I very much understood and accepted that I have to feel worse to get better. So every week I was trying to trigger those symptoms a little bit, be at peace with it, and then the next week do a little bit more. I thought it was more about the movement. I didn't understand everything else then.
Right.
But yeah, I know it's tough when you feel like crap and you're like, oh, great, a learning opportunity.
I love that word. It's an opportunity.
Yeah.
Right. You need to open that door to change anything. But people assume that, well, I have the methods now. Does this mean that, I'm not going to feel like shit? That means if I feel like shit, that means I'm doing something wrong. Yeah. And actually, that's not. It's like you need it. You need to feel like shit in order to gain the leverage to move through that door, to open that door to reprogram. It's interesting. And it is an opportunity. That's well put. I love that.
So you have an amazing YouTube channel that you're really passionate about that has a lot of great stuff for people. So tell us about that.
Yeah, I'm trying to get more guests on there. So I started my YouTube channel with having an interview with Dan Boogly on his channel. And then I started getting traffic. So I was like, okay, I got to start recording some content. So most of the content is me in my truck and just talking about my journey, talking about all the little things that I did, the golden nuggets that I found to help people. And I started posting things. I started getting more attention. So I thought, okay, I'm going to start doing group coaching. So I did group coaching and I start posting some of the group coaching so people can see the in-between of their journey, not just the success stories. I like success stories. I'm going to put some more of those too, but I like the in-between times of people that are going through the suffering, going through the setbacks, falling on their faces, so that when people are what they're dealing with, if they see that, they can go, oh my goodness, I'm going through that right now, right? And then they see their progression. It gives them hope and that evidence that they can also recover. And for me, I kind of display it in a way that I'm just an average Joe. I'm not a person that's, went to school or anything like that. I'm just a guy in a truck with 2 dogs that had the 70 symptoms and fully recovered. And that makes people think, you know what, I can do it too, right? So that's my goal. I try to also add in some comedy into it. Not forcefully, it just kind of happens because I talk about all the bullshit that I went through and all the embarrassing situations, the times where I thought I was going crazy, and I give examples of it so that I can kind of bring down that big mountain, that big monster, so that I cut it down to size so it's something that people aren't too overwhelmed with and they can laugh about. And it also gives them reassurance and a little bit of a feeling that, you know what, he did it. There's the evidence. Like maybe the smokes and mirrors are just smokes and mirrors. Maybe, it gives people more confidence and they can pull it down and they can start to move forward and cross that bridge with confidence instead of being out to sea with no lighthouse, right? You're just kind of, and then my goal is to kind of set up a lighthouse so people go, okay, well, here's a path. I just got to follow it. And, the brain will have no choice but to change if I just stick with it.
Yeah.
So that's my goal.
That's amazing. I love that there's all these resources out there for people now. And I think it's incredible that you're doing this. It's just, we need this stuff out there. For those of you watching, expand the video description. All of his information will be there. So you can find his YouTube channel and everything that you need to know about Helmut if you want to learn more from him. Yeah. Thank you so much for this, Helmut. This has been incredible. I really love your energy, your optimism. I know you've been through less than pleasant few years, but I love how you're kind of coming at it with this great energy and trying to put it out there into the world. And of all the millions of people who are facing these things, it's like, okay, yeah. I did it. I'm an average Joe. Your humility is amazing. So just thank you so much. I really appreciate you. And thanks for your time.
Thank you for all you're doing. I appreciate it. And it makes me feel good that we're we're helping people. And I'm happy to be a part of this with you. Thank you very much.
Oh yeah. It's such an honor, isn't it? I absolutely love it. I just want to send a quick shout out to Alexandra Alberts. She is a channel member. Thank you, Alexandra, for joining. We appreciate the support. If you're watching and you'd like to join, support the channel, get some extra perks, you can click the join button to learn more. So thank you again, Helmut. Thank you, all of you who are watching. If you have a story to tell and you'd like to come on my channel or on Helmut's channel, let us know. All the information you need is in the video description. And I love what you said about hearing from people who are still on their journey. It's something very much I'm trying to share as well. So if you're watching and you're like, oh, I'd like to come on one of these channels, but I'm not there yet. That is great. You still have learned so much. So just your story has value and people want to hear it. So yeah, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you got tons out of it, and I hope to see you in this next one.